I think every provincial government across the country understands how important it is to be there for Canadians who are facing real pressures around the cost of living. That's what we're doing. That's why we're stepping up to support Canadians, and I'm expecting provinces who see the challenges that their citizens are facing to realize that this is a way they can be there for people as they face the challenges of the next few months.
That's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today, responding to new concerns raised by New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt over a proposed GST holiday. So here's the issue. It'll apply to the GST and HST on consumer goods, including many that could be deemed non-essential. Now, New Brunswick is one of 5 provinces with a harmonized sales tax, which combines the federal and provincial tax on goods and services. So in those provinces, the federal government collects the revenue and then sends the provinces their portion. Well, today, Premier Susan Holt said that the proposed tax break could cost her province $62 million in revenue. Terrible timing, considering the province recently released an updated deficit forecast of $92.1 million for the current fiscal year. So, will the province be looking for the feds to help recoup those financial losses? New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt joins me right now. Hi, Premier. Welcome to Power Play. Thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
So New Brunswick is one of those 5 provinces where there is a harmonized tax on goods and services. The federal government collects the revenue and then sends the province's portion back to you. What is going to happen now that the Trudeau government has announced this GST and HST holiday?
Oh, well, what's going to happen? That's something that we're figuring out right now. We're getting familiar with the list of goods that they've put forward. New Brunswickers have told us they're excited by the idea of paying less tax. Who doesn't want a tax break, I suppose, particularly at this time of year? And so we're just figuring out how it's going to benefit the economy, what the cost might be to our fiscal situation in the province, and working out all the details.
Yeah, and that's what I sort of wanted to ask you about, because you have raised some concerns that this could put a big hole in your coffers. How big of a hole?
I think that the estimate's around $62 million of tax that we otherwise would have collected, but that doesn't take into account the increased economic activity that's also been forecast. So we're just trying to figure out what the net impact is so that we can understand what we've got to work with.
And in those terms, what are the conversations like that you're having with the federal government? Because I know that there are some provinces like Nova Scotia that seem to have this insurance policy to protect against something like this, where if the taxes that are charged are worth more than 1% of revenues, or the taxes are changed are worth more than 1% of revenue, that the federal government actually would compensate the province. So do you not have that deal in New Brunswick?
I believe that same agreement applies across all of the provinces that have the harmonized tax. I think one of the areas where it differs depends on how much of the items on the list are already exempt from tax, like we see in Ontario, I think, who had already removed the provincial tax off of a number of things that are on this list. And that's actually something that our team had gone through not too long ago, because New Brunswickers have told us for the last 2 years that the rising cost of living has been really making life challenging for them. And so we've been looking at affordability measures, trying to figure out how we can help people live affordably in New Brunswick. That's why we proposed to take the 10% tax off power bills, why we were looking at school food programs, and we're going to really invest in that here in New Brunswick. We looked at taking the tax off of a number of different things that are essential items that we thought would help New Brunswickers. So the impact, I think, is a little bit different province to province, and we're still working out exactly where it's going to land here.
And I ask also because your province just had an economic update where you forecasted a $92 million deficit. So this could have a significant impact, couldn't it?
That's right. We know we're forecasting a $92 million deficit now after the second quarter. If we imagine adding another $60 million of a deficit to that, that grows to $150 million. So that's something that we have to wrestle with and figure out. There's lots of different things that come in and out of our forecasts as we learn of new revenues that might be coming in, as we learn of revenues that might not be coming in, like through this program. But we also know that New Brunswickers really like the idea of a tax break. And I'm not sure I want to be the one to stand between them and a tax break at this time of year in particular. So we're trying to figure it out and see what we can make work. And we've got open lines of communication with the federal government. They've been pretty communicative over these last 2 days as we've tried to figure this out and see how we can work together on it.
So does that mean that you're going to follow in the footsteps of somebody like Andrew Furey, the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, and make sure that you don't continue to also collect that portion of it, even though I know it is collected by the federal government, but will you also waive your portion of the HST?
Well, I think, look, Andrew Furey's footsteps are big footsteps to follow in. So I appreciate the conversations that he and I have had about this and understanding what it's looking like in his province. He's in the same boat that I am. He has Newfoundlanders, just like New Brunswickers, that are trying to figure out how to pay their bills. And they're looking at their credit card debt going up, and they're looking at the holidays coming. And so I think both Andrew and I share a desire to try to make life more affordable for the people of our provinces and try to figure out how we can do what governments are responsible for doing, figuring out how we balance the books and make this work and deliver a benefit to the people who live here.
So I just want to be clear for people in New Brunswick. Does this mean that you're going to also make sure that you are not taking that portion of the HST, the provincial portion of the HST? You will not be looking for a way to recoup that money or to collect it from taxpayers?
So the federal government is the one who collects these taxes because it's harmonized. We are not looking for a way to recoup that money from the taxpayers of New Brunswickers. And we're not looking at because they've taken this tax down, we're not going to put up an equivalent tax. The whole point of this program is to deliver that benefit and that relief to New Brunswickers. We've already started the exercise because of the $92 million deficit to find savings, to find opportunities to wrap up programs and initiatives that aren't delivering benefits to New Brunswickers so that we can live within our means the same way New Brunswickers are trying to live within their means.
So is the solution here to the deficit that you may have and a wider deficit that you may have as a result of these revenues that won't be coming in, is the solution to have the federal government then make up that money to New Brunswick?
Well, we're actually having a lot of conversations with the federal government about areas that we want to partner. And I mentioned school food a little bit earlier. We're really looking forward to striking a deal on school food because it was a commitment that we put in our electoral platform. It's a program that they have available to fund. And so we've already started the conversations with the federal government about New Brunswick's need and what kind of contribution would be most impactful to that program. We're talking to them about energy costs. We're talking to the federal government about investments in renewable energies. We're talking to them about health technology costs in New Brunswick. And so there is a lot of points of conversation where we're looking for partnership and investment from the federal government into the things that matter to New Brunswickers. And those conversations are going to continue. And we're looking to maybe get some ink on those deals sooner than later.
But on the HST, are you going to be asking the federal government to make you whole for your portion of the HST?
We've certainly flagged to them some concerns about how this is going to, hit our bottom line, and we're trying to find the right way forward. But I think that there's a real benefit here to be offered to New Brunswickers, and I think there's more conversations for us to have with the federal government.
On affordability, one of the measures that your party had promised was repealing the carbon cost adjuster. If you're unable to get back that HST money from the federal government, will you reconsider your own plan since that adjuster does shave about 4 cents per litre off the price of gas?
Well, we've actually tabled that legislation in the House this week because our team here is moving fast. And so it had second reading. It didn't actually get to second reading today because of our legislation about the rent cap.
But in fairness, that was before this HST issue came up. So does that change the calculation for you since you may need that money now?
No, it doesn't. We committed to New Brunswickers that we were going to take that 4 cents off of the price of gas by eliminating that adjuster that lands on the consumer. And that was a commitment we made during the election. That's one of the reasons why New Brunswickers elected my team in such great numbers. And so we're not going back on that commitment we made to them because of this new program from the federal government.
And I wanted to ask you about what is going on south of the border. About 90% of what your province exports does go to the United States. How worried are you about those 10% tariffs that are being threatened by President-elect Donald Trump?
Oh, very worried. Thank you for the question, because you're right. It's not only 90%, it's 92% of New Brunswick's exports are going into the U.S. So it's critical to us that we have a competitive environment to trade in and that those tariffs don't come to pass. So we're taking a whole Team Canada approach to this one. We had a meeting with all of the premiers to talk about this specifically this week, and we're going to continue to work together and with the folks in the U.S. to make sure they understand how integrated the Canadian and U.S. economies are, how integrated New Brunswick is into so many of the supply chains in the U.S., and the damage that would come both to the U.S. economy as well as that of New Brunswick if they were to put those tariffs in place.
But Premier, in fairness, while you were campaigning, a Trump presidency was a very real possibility. So why didn't you factor all of these tariffs into the cost of your platform when you were going to the voters?
That's an interesting question. So we, certainly didn't build our platform to hedge on who might be president.
But you must have known that that was a very real possibility, and wouldn't you have had a contingency plan?
We have a bit of contingency built into our budgets, absolutely, because there's lots of different things that can happen during the course of a year that has an impact on your budget. So we have programs that we can scale up and scale down. And then we have economic forecasts that we're constantly revising to get a sense of what the rate of growth is going to be and what we're looking at. So we certainly had a sense that a Trump administration might have a potential impact on economic activity, but we're also pretty optimistic that the last time Trump was president and attempted to put tariffs in place, they didn't last very long. About 4 weeks, I think, before the president realized how detrimental it was to the U.S. economy. And I think that there's ways for our country and our province to work with the U.S. To make sure that we continue to have those strong working relationships, and we look at where the real sort of risk and impact is coming from to tackle that together.
Is that even if softwood lumber continues to be a contentious issue between these two countries? Because I know that that's a big deal for your province as well.
Oh my gosh, it absolutely is a big deal, and we would love to see the federal government get a softwood lumber deal signed with the U.S. as soon as possible, because that's one area where we're already experiencing tariffs.
But that's often something that President Trump brings up.
Yeah, and we're hopeful that we can work out with the new U.S. administration and in partnership with our colleagues across Canada a better deal than the one we have right now, because it's not allowing for the kind of competition that I think New Brunswick producers deserve.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It was much appreciated on my end.